as you all know, our draft is next Saturday.
Dude, you're going to get to this draft prepared like a fresh virgin.
Well, I guess my chair will be popped on that day.
True.
Knee slapper. Well, welcome back, people of the league. We are here for another week of advice from the fantasy football guru, Aaron Watkins. He's with us again. I hope you enjoyed our episode. I will admit I was about 10, 12 tall boys in when we did that. So if it sounded a little off, I apologize. But this week, so as you all know, our draft is next Saturday. So almost a week away from today. We will be at Kyle Turman's backyard for some fun and festivities. And so before the draft, we thought it'd be a really good idea if we can get Aaron on here. And what he's going to do is just go through his top 5 picks that he likes, not necessarily in rank of how ESPN has them, but how Aaron has them and who he likes from 1 to 5, going through all the skilled positions. We're not doing defense or kickers because no. So, Aaron, go ahead and take it away, man. Start off with QB. Oh, real quick. So, before we start this, I have already told Tom this, but I'm going to let everybody know. I'm going anti-fragile. All right, shout out to Aaron.
Ooh,
I'm not doing any research at all.
Oh, God.
Uh-oh.
Here we go with another second to last minute.
No, because every year that I've done a lot of research, I seem to finish second to last. So I'm going to go against the grain, and I'm just going to go with my gut from a football sense and draft based off, and I'm going to be doing it based off who you all pick, and et cetera. But I'm not going to have any sheets. I'm literally just going with my gut, and we're going to see how I do.
YOLO.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting.
It is, but I want to make sure everyone knows that. Okay, I'm my bad. So, Aaron, go ahead and take it away and give us, your top 5 for quarterbacks who you like this year.
No, but before we get started with that, man, I am pumped about this draft.
Oh, yeah.
We haven't had sports in 3 or 4 months. Then baseball started back. Basketball playoffs started. So I'm pumped for this fantasy draft.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Aaron.
Well, I was just going to say on that note, thanks for having me back on. Have you guys seen Hard Knocks?
I've heard about it. I haven't seen
the LA
it
Rams. Is it good?
Well, I mean, it's Hard Knocks. To me, it's good every year.
It's good.
Hard Knocks. But to Kyle's point, like seeing Hard Knocks for the first time this season was just like, oh shit, here we go. All the feels. Favorite time of the year, inject it into my veins. I love it. Yes. So, I'm fired up.
They're dissing on your boy Lamar, man. There are people, I was like saying Kyler Murray is going to be better. It's like Lamar he can't get any love, man.
Dude, that's
the
MVP.
Scary.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. There's, haters are going to hate. It continues to be the same thing every season. Ravens are never sexy, no matter what the case is.
You're a bunch of killers.
An elite franchise. You look at from the time they've been in the league since 1990. Just one of the best franchises, first class.
Okay. Anyway, moving on. Let's just continue on and let's go to the quarterbacks, Aaron.
Okay. So the way I'm doing it, I'm not just saying, okay, this is QB 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because I think we all know, relatively speaking, but I'm giving you at each of these positions, I'm giving you 5 players that I like a lot relative to their ADP. So at quarterback, easily my favorite this season is Ben Roethlisberger. You look at 2018. This is a team that led the NFL in pass attempts. It was the first year they had their current offensive coordinator in the play calling role. He was previously the quarterback's coach. Led the league in pass attempts. Put up big numbers. Remember, Antonio Brown was still there. Juju Smith-Schuster was a top 10 guy. James Conner was a top 10 guy. And Ben Roethlisberger was a top 5 fantasy quarterback. So obviously the only question is health, right? In terms of the elbow. I'm choosing to believe what's getting reported out of camp thus far. Obviously everybody's in their best shape of their life right now. Yeah. But reportedly, the surgery went really well for Ben. He lost a little bit of weight coming into camp as well. All reports are that he's throwing the ball with just way more accuracy, precision, purpose. I read an article on The Athletic that said he looked like he was just throwing darts all around the field, and it was a huge difference when Mason Rudolph came on. So if you're bullish on this offense, you could be getting easily top 7 fantasy quarterback in the 10th, 11th, sometimes even 12th round.
Well, I can guarantee you now someone's in our league's going to draft him like first pick.
Yeah.
I'm sure Taylor's happy about the prop up for Big Ben.
Yeah, of course.
And I wouldn't get carried away with it. Like, I definitely still have Mahomes, Lamar, Dak, Deshaun ahead of him. But yeah, Ben Roethlisberger was the first one. Matt Ryan, I do like, just because I think he's priced really appropriately. If you are in a position where, say, 8th, 9th round, you want to take a quarterback and Matt Ryan is there, I think that's perfectly fine. This is an offense that's going to be toward the top of the NFL in pass attempts, just like they were last season. You look at the personnel that they brought in. Todd Gurley doesn't really figure to eat into any kind of pass production too much in terms of getting like a really huge running role. So I think you're getting you already know what you're going to get with Matt Ryan, easily top 10 potential.
Yeah, let me break down his personnel real quick. You got Julio the Jet Jones on the outside. He's a beast. You got Calvin Ridley, one of the best underrated players, I think, this year in fantasy. And then you got Hayden Hurst, who is a beast that nobody really knows about at tight end. You got Todd Gurley at the running back. You got Ito Smith at running back. Brian Hill at running back. This team is loaded on offense.
So yeah, apparently Kyle's at the top.
But it's legit. Completely love him. The next one I'm going to go to is Dak Prescott. I think Dak Prescott is a lot closer in a tier to. So the way I do my projections is really on a conservative range of outcomes. So for Lamar Jackson, for example, I'm not projecting him, for 900 yards the way I think ESPN does. I'm projecting him closer to like 650, 700 yards. So on that kind of scale where everyone is projected in a conservative kind of median range, Dak Prescott is pretty close to, you're only talking like 20, 30 points off from Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes. But he's a guy I see fall to like the 7th round consistently. So if you feel really good about what you have with running backs, wide receivers, maybe you got a tight end, I don't see any kind of problem with taking Dak. And it could be a steal when you're talking about a guy who's probably going to be at least top 3 at the position on one of the best offenses with a ridiculous schedule. If you take a look at the schedule for Dallas, it's absolutely delicious. A defense that doesn't project to be an elite defense by any measure. I'm all aboard for Dak Prescott. Fourth one I would give you is Aaron Rodgers. There's definitely a big kind of down tick on Aaron Rodgers. Like, if you listen to the industry podcast, whatever, Aaron Rodgers is dead, right? Like, he's fallen off a cliff. He's going to become Ryan Tannehill this season. The reality is they're still going to throw the ball at least 25 times a game. If you have a healthy Devontae Adams, plenty of touchdown upside, what they did, a lot of people are excited about Jay Sternberger at tight end, just in terms of the athleticism he could potentially bring. Jimmy Graham didn't, obviously pan out very well as a guy who was already on, outside of his prime. So Aaron Rodgers projects to be easily within range of, a top 15 fantasy quarterback this season, but another guy I see, fall to like the 11th, 12th round. So these are guys you can get really late. And my favorite one in that range, in this I'm kind of cheating a little bit because he's my sleeper too, but he's not really a sleeper, is Cam Newton. So hear me out on this, okay? Obviously, Cam Newton is in New England this season playing for Bill Belichick. This isn't going to be the same kind of offense we saw previously. The closest comp I think we can get is an extremely small sample. It's back in 2016 when Tom Brady had gotten hurt, Jimmy Garoppolo got hurt, and Jacoby Brissett came in and played 3 games. In that span, Jacoby Brissett saw an 18% market share of rush attempts per game. saw almost 30% market share of rushing touchdowns per game. So the question going into this season is, one, who do you think wins the starting job? Is it Cam Newton? Is it Jarrett Stidham? I tend to believe it's Cam, but there's at least a possibility that it's not. But if we say, okay, Cam is the guy for 16 games, then I think this is an offense where Cam could potentially see 20% of the rushing work. And if he could have a better performance, and by the way, Jacoby Brissett in 2016, that was a team that had LeGarrette Blount, who carried the ball almost 300 times. I don't think Sony Michel grades out the same way LeGarrette Blount did back in 2016. So you could even see a 40% kind of market share in terms of running touchdowns for Cam Newton. If he were to produce at that rate and only throw for about 3,400 yards, 19 touchdowns, which is easily, within range, you're talking about a guy who's just there with Kyler Murray, right? Just there with Josh Allen. And these are people who are being drafted in the first 6 rounds. Cam Newton, most of the time, is free. We're talking 12th round and later. So again, if you want to take 2 quarterbacks, I wouldn't feel really confident right now in a draft taking Cam as my QB1. But if you're going to take 2 quarterbacks on a team, I think Cam Newton is an easy flyer.
And what I was going to say to that, to credit your point, is just strictly from a football sense. Okay, I'm not talking fantasy. The one thing that the Patriots do really well is they're like Maroon 5. Okay, they they're always relevant. Like they change their music. Okay, music being their style of play for the Patriots to adapt and win. So Cam Newton comes on. Guess what Bill Belichick and them are going to do? If he's the starting quarterback, they're going to adapt and they're going to go, okay, we see that dual threat quarterbacks are now becoming, they're now becoming prominent, and okay, this is maybe the recipe to win, and we got some of the ingredients with Cam Newton. So I think that he might, as you're going to say, I just think that he could have a really good, how do you say it, high ceiling.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he could, I mean, this guy could go off. You know what I mean? Like, and he's angry and pissed off. So.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and like Aaron was talking about, I mean, you can basically get him at the end of your draft for free, so why not take a flyer if he ends up being the starter, see how he does for 3 or 4 weeks. If he pops off, well, then you have a legit quarterback. If not, he hurts his shoulder again, you can drop him, and it really didn't cost you anything.
Yeah.
100%.
Cool. All right, so let's go to running backs. Now, let me ask you this question before we start, okay? Now, I'm not doing any mock drafts. I'm not doing shit. I'm serious. I'm going anti-fucking-fragile here, okay?
I mean, that's an interesting take on
it. It is.
Dude, you're going to get to this draft prepared like a fresh virgin.
Well, I guess my chair will be popped on that day. But anyway, we should probably edit that out. I'm seeing Edwards-Helaire fucking top 5 running back.
Yeah.
I don't see it. I really don't. And Aaron, you know me with the Chiefs. I can always predict shit, and I seem to be right. I don't see it. I really don't. I don't know how he's not going to be that good the first year. He's not.
So and I think that's very interesting. The Clyde Edwards-Helaire situation is highly intriguing, right? Because obviously Damian Williams opted out. So my initial take was to sort of say, okay, sort of the market is saying one thing and is gravitating towards this assumed reality, right? Which is, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to absolutely smash and destroy. So I wanted to dig into that and see, okay, logically, can we get there? Is that stretchy? Here's the reality. Andy Reid's track record with rookie running backs is absolutely delicious. You're going all the way back to Brian Westbrook. You're talking about Shady McCoy, and you're talking about Kareem Hunt. These are guys that when they came in, they had similar skill set, right? You can run them between the tackles. You can run them outside. You can throw it to them. You could even, if you wanted to, line them outside on occasion. Clyde Edwards-Helaire checks all those boxes from all the reports you have. You look at the numbers and you look at the kind of usage he had at LSU a season ago. Immense work in the passing game. So here's my take on it is I wanted to say, okay, how do I project a running back, right? Assuming I know nothing about this guy, how do I project a running back compared to the Damian Williams role from a year ago? If you look last season, they shared kind of a lot of work. You know, Damian Williams had less than 50% of the rushing attempts.
About to say, Damian Williams only came on the scene in the playoffs.
Less than 50% of the work in the rushing yards per game category. So when you're talking about this kind of role, that's not the delicious, you know, Zeke Elliott kind of role we want, right? Where you're talking 60+% of the work. Well, Clyde Edwards-Helaire probably grades a little bit closer to a rookie Kareem Hunt or a rookie LaShawn McCoy than a veteran Damian Williams. So if we say, okay, let's bump him up maybe 6 percentage points to like a 52% role in this offense, that's a smash spot. And, you know, I'm not on board with saying, okay, I want him top 5 because I'm not taking him ahead of, you know, Alvin Kamara or, you know, certainly not ahead of Zeke, Dalvin, guys like that. But would I take him ahead of Joe Mixon, or would I maybe take him ahead of Kenyon Drake? Absolutely. I've got him projected slightly ahead of Kenyon Drake, and I love Kenyon Drake this season. So I'm aboard on Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Really? That is surprising.
His ADP is closer to, you know, 7-8. I'm on board there, right? Because
really,
what you're essentially doing.
No. So you're telling me in 12-man, hang on. So you're telling me in 12-man league.
Yeah.
If I've got the 7th pick, I'm going to draft him?
Depends on how the draft goes. So let's look at who typically comes off the board, right? If you're picking number 7.
I don't know.
Michael Thomas, we're right? If you're picking number 7, Michael Thomas is usually gone. Dalvin, Alvin Kamara, Zeke, obviously CMC, and probably Saquon is also gone. In that scenario, are you taking Derrick Henry? Are you taking Nick Chubb? Are you taking maybe Devontae Adams or Julio there, which is kind of high in my opinion? Or do you take a shot on a Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who, if he can see, basically here's the situation for him. If he can see 55% of the work, you have an utter smash spot.
I understand.
You have a top 5 fantasy running back.
But not to interrupt you. So was he in the top 5 you were going to mention?
Oh, no, he wasn't.
Okay, we got to get back on track. But hang on, before we get back to your running backs, just got to say one thing. We're forgetting about someone named Darwin Thompson, okay, who was a rookie last year, who I was like, we should watch out for him. And they brought Spencer Ware. They brought LaShawn McCoy. McCoy could hold to the football. What I think is going to happen with Damian Williams opting out is this guy right here is going to be the workhorse.
Dude, I have to disagree with that. I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire is definitely the number 1 in Kansas City, and they just signed, I forget his first name, but Washington. He was with the Raiders, so I think he's going to slide in as the number 2.
Okay.
And that's at least on line with what's been reported, right? Now, in terms of Darwin Thompson, you're talking about a guy who saw like 13% of the rushing work. And then even if you say, okay, well, maybe he was more involved in the pass game, on a per game basis, he was only seeing, again, less than 10% of pass attempts. So it makes it kind of tough to say, oh, and actually it was 2% for Darwin Thompson on a per game basis last year for targets. So it's tough to say, okay, this guy's going to go from total 15% of touches all the way up to, say, 30 or 35% when you compare the draft capital. You know, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, you're talking about a first-round draft pick. That means a lot in today's NFL. You know, obviously not the same kind of position as Zeke or Saquon in previous years, but when teams take a first-round player, they have a tendency to want to make that work, right? As a GM, you kind of need that to work out for your job security. So Clyde Edwards-Helaire, it's almost impossible for me to project him for anything lower than at least the Damian Williams role. So it's not a lot of room because Darrell Williams got more work than Darwin Thompson last season. And DeAndre Washington, I think, is notable. This is a guy, as you know, who was in their division, right? And they went out and brought in a guy that they had competed against twice a year. So like Kyle said, I mean, the expectation and what we've seen out of camp so far is that DeAndre Washington would be a little bit more likely to be in that number 2 running back role than Darwin. So I think I'm pretty high on him. but not top 5.
Okay, we'll do your top 5.
Okay, so at running back, first one I'm going to go with is Dalvin Cook. And again, this is relative to ADP.
And he may not play. He needs to get paid. The man needs to get paid.
Yeah, I can hear everybody right now in our league. What is this guy talking about? He's not taking Christian McCaffrey as his number 1? So explain to them what ADP is and why you're not selecting just 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay, exactly right. So basically what ADP is, you're talking about average draft position. So that's looking at, for the majority of drafts, and whether it's ESPN, Yahoo, whatever website, for the majority of drafts, where are players typically being selected? So Christian McCaffrey is a consensus number 1, meaning pretty much any draft format you're in, it's a high chance Christian McCaffrey is going to be the first overall pick. So basically what I was doing with this, top 5 is relative to their ADP. So with Christian McCaffrey, well, you're not getting a steal. You're not, winning anything necessarily because you got Christian McCaffrey first overall. Well, that's where he's projected. That's where he should be. And if he finishes as the number 1 player, then great. But really it's actually, and just a very quick aside, if you look at running backs who actually finished the previous year as the number 1 fantasy running back, 0 of them, going back to 2012, 0 of them repeated that performance the following season, meaning they were not number 1 fantasy running back the next year.
McCaffrey gets hurt this year, hot take.
I mean, it's a possibility. The closest you had was Todd Gurley, who was number 1, and then the following season he was the 4th overall player. That's a little bit more what I think is within the range, but again, that's fine if you take him first. So in terms of Dalvin, a lot of times right now, and especially because of the recent news, he's maybe available for you at 6, maybe even 7, where I think it's a complete steal. This is a guy that if you told me for sure Dalvin Cook is going to play all 16 games, I would take him number 2 overall. I would take him ahead of Zeke. I would take him ahead of Saquon. And the reason why is he already had the same kind of workload that Zeke and Saquon had last season. The difference is with Stephon Diggs out of the mix, no competition added, he has maybe an even higher upside for touchdowns this season than he did a year ago. So again, you look at 16 games, I would take him second. The other guy I would really like relative to ADP is Kenyon Drake. I'm seeing Kenyon Drake often fall into the second round.
Really?
I'm seeing that happen frequently. For him coming off the board, top of the second round. His ADP, I believe, is like 10th or 11th overall. But even there, this is a guy who at least has top 6, top 7 at the position upside. You could potentially, again, I really like Alvin Kamara this year, but you could potentially be getting an Alvin Kamara type fantasy performance for, 4 or 5 picks later. So Kenyon Drake's a guy I really like. Austin Eckler is a person that I think is being a little bit undervalued because people really don't know how to project them or how to look at them. You know me, Malcolm. I try to look at what teams are indicating via their transactions.
Right.
And this is a team that is coming to the year. Justin Jackson as their RB2. And I think they drafted a guy, I want to say the 3rd round, as an RB3. So essentially no added competition for a quote unquote lead back role. Obviously Austin Eckler made a big impact in the passing game this season. I don't project the same volume just because I don't think they're going to throw as much with Tyrod as they did with Phil Rivers. But I definitely project a big increase in terms of goal line opportunities as well as just pure rushing work. And you can get him as an RB2 right now. In some cases, bottom of the second round, which I think is perfectly fine. James Conner is another guy I wanted to point out. He's going kind of in that range of like Leonard Fournette, Melvin Gordon, in some cases, Chris Carson. Look at the 2018 season. This is a guy who was a top 10 fantasy running back.
He went the fuck off.
Absolutely. When you look at last season, in the games he was healthy, he still had a healthy majority of the rushing work. We're talking 55+%. So if you look at this team with one of the best projected defenses in football going into the season, yes, I think they're going to throw the football a lot with Big Ben back, former quarterbacks coach as the offensive coordinator. But obviously this is Pittsburgh. This is the AFC North. They will continue to run the football at least 25 plus times a game. And if you have a guy who's seeing 17 plus of those carries, plus seeing about 2 to 3 targets per game, that's an easy path to a top 10 fantasy running back, which again, can you really project that for Melvin Gordon? Can you project that for Chris Carson? Can you project that for Fournette? I don't think so. This is the kind of range where you can get James Conner. So I think he's kind of a steal, especially if you can get him at like the top of the 4th, bottom of the 3rd. Easily my favorite running back, my 5th guy, is David Montgomery. And Malcolm is going to cringe this one. And I know a lot of people listening are going to cringe with this one. But here's the story for David Montgomery. Last season, they started off the year.
That's the story.
Well, look, he hurt a lot of people. I had David Montgomery on teams I still won a championship on. But, you know, I know that he was definitely painful to have on your team. But here's the deal. As a team, they scored 8 rushing touchdowns last year. 8. Okay, out of 16 games. David Montgomery scored 6 of those. Mitch Trubisky scored the other 2. This is, and when you talk about a market share of the rushing touchdowns, it's a completely elite rate. You look at their depth chart this year, another situation where you have no added competition for touches, no added competition for goal line carries. Even if you look at Aaron Jones, people are nervous about him because of the addition of A.J. Dillon, who I don't know if you guys have seen the photos. He's apparently like this massive, you know,
he went to Boston College. He's like a beast.
Right.
His
So
college highlights are insane.
Exactly. So it makes people nervous about, okay, is he going to maybe take some goal line touches? There's nobody on the Bears roster that's going to take goal line touches away from David Montgomery, who when you look, he was in the top 15 of the league in attempts inside the 10. Now, where did it go wrong? Well, he was completely inefficient. His conversion rate on attempts inside the 10-yard line was about 16-17%. Now, compared to the league average of about 48%, if he had just got to, let's say he was bad, maybe just 30%, you're talking about 9 touchdowns, and you're talking about a guy who's a top 15 fantasy running back versus a fringe top 25 fantasy running back. If you're looking for people who have 10 plus touchdown upside, David Montgomery has to be a choice. And I expect this offense to be better. I think Nick Foles is going to get the job. You look at the offense coordinator they brought in. You look at the quarterbacks coach they brought in. Those are both people who have history with Foles. So I think Trubisky is going to get the opportunity to start. But it's going to be an incredibly short leash. So if this offense is just a smidge better, a smidge more efficient than they were last season, a little bit more lucky, you could get an absolute steal on David Montgomery, who's often going in like the 5th round right now.
Yeah, and I'm projecting that offense to be a lot better when Big Nick takes over and controls that offense instead of Mitchell Trubisky.
Knee slapper. That's interesting about David Montgomery. But
are you drafting him again, Malcolm?
If he's there, why not? I mean, whatever my gut's gonna tell me is what I'm gonna draft.
So.
Okay. Let's go into receivers.
Okay, yeah. So one thing I do want to say real quick on the receiver note is one thing I would recommend in drafts, and what I've been trying to do a lot in mocks, is take advantage of what trends are going on live in the draft, right? So when you have, if you're noticing guys like Todd Gurley coming off the board in the 2nd round, Chris Carson coming off the board in the 2nd round, Leonard Fournette, you got a lot of running backs coming off the board quickly. There might be an opportunity to really stack up at wide receiver. And if you're in a league where you can roster 3 of them in a PPR season, imagine your team if you have 3 top 15 fantasy wide receivers and you already got at least 1 running back. That could be kind of like an anchor RB approach. So wide receiver I think is super deep. There's a lot of guys I like relative to ADP. Number 1 is Juju Smith-Schuster. So obviously I'm high on Big Ben. I'm high on the Pittsburgh Steelers offense. Look at Juju Smith-Schuster in 2018. This is on the same team as Antonio Brown, who had more than 160 targets. Juju Smith-Schuster was still a top 10 fantasy wideout that season. Now, last year, I think you have to completely throw out of the books, right?
Yeah, you had Mason
Right.
Rudolph.
Jesus.
And don't forget, didn't they also have Duck Rogers for a couple of games?
Who?
Exactly,
Who?
yeah, Duck Rogers.
Who?
So it's again, if you think Big Ben is washed and this is a team that's just just over, then obviously you can be down on Juju. But if you think, hey, Big Ben is at least going to get to some version of what he was for the past 3 years we had seen him, then Juju Smith-Schuster is a complete steal right now in the third round. You're talking about a guy who could easily finish ahead of people that he's drafted behind. Guys like Kenny Golladay, Allen Robinson, DJ Moore. I could go on, and I would even feel comfortable, taking Juju Smith-Schuster as my wide receiver one on any team, because I think he has that much upside. Another guy, again.
And real quick, and the fact that you're a Ravens fan and you're this high on their offense should speak volumes.
Oh yeah. Exactly, right. Yeah. So I hate the Steelers with a passion, but when it comes to fantasy, I don't care about any of that. I just want the best upside, and there's no doubt about it. Juju is someone I want on every single team. I literally want him on every single one of my teams this year. My other guy is Calvin Ridley. So obviously really liked Matt Ryan a lot. So Calvin Ridley, if you look at his amount of work last season on a per game basis, it was not very far off from Julio Jones. You were talking about a 24% market share for Julio, about a 20% share for Calvin Ridley. Going into this season, again, if you're projecting out 16 games, it's very hard for him to not hit 1,000 yards. All the reports out of camp so far, again, everyone's in the best shape, et cetera, but he's a guy who has a really clear path because, again, Devontae Freeman had about a 10% market share of targets per game last season. Todd Gurley's career high was last season at 8%. So there could be even a few more opportunities that open up for Calvin Ridley, not to mention Austin Hooper no longer being there. If you say, okay, Hayden Hurst doesn't walk into that full role, he just gets maybe a version of it, you could be seeing maybe 5% or 3% increase in work for Calvin Ridley. Easily that could be delivering you, top 12 upside at the position. And the last thing I'll say on him is if there was a guy this season who you say, okay, who's the Chris Godwin, right, from last year? Calvin Ridley is probably the closest to it. And this is someone that you can get potentially in the fifth, even sixth round. I think this is a fourth, third, second round pick. Easily a guy I would take as like my wide receiver too.
Yeah, and a quick note on Ridley. The Falcons' defense is going to be terrible this year, so they're going to be trailing in a bunch of games, and they're going to have to throw it to keep up with teams. So
all that garbage time production, we love it in fantasy. And then Michael Gallup is my third guy. I don't really understand what the problem is with Michael Gallup right now. You look at his projection, it's as if he's just going to do exactly what he did last season, where he only played, I believe it was 14 games. On a per game basis, this is a guy who actually had a higher target share than Amari Cooper, had a higher touchdown share than Amari Cooper. So we go into this season, if you want to talk about more consistent, lower bust rate, right, higher percentage of at least wide receiver 3, higher percentage of at least wide receiver 2, Michael Gallup checks a lot more boxes than Amari Cooper, yet he's going about 4 to 5 rounds later. Amari Cooper, someone who's coming off the board third round usually. Michael Gallup, I've seen fall all the way to 7. It's something that's very bizarre to me. I really don't understand what it is. This offense should at least be as good as they were last season, and I really project them to be better.
Let me say something from a football sense real quick as to why that might be. This could sound absolutely very ignorant and stupid, but Michael, from a football standpoint, if I'm a defensive coordinator and my entire job is to get ready for next season, okay? And I correlate this to fantasy football a lot because we're looking at all these people that, like you're saying, I don't get the deal about Michael Gallup, all these stats, etc. Well, these defensive coordinators for other teams are looking at the same thing. So I get nervous that if this guy had a sneaky good year last year, aren't they going to plan and say, hey, wait a second, this guy, we can't let him beat us, week 3 of the 2020 season, we got to shut him down. I mean, do you ever think about that?
Yes, I think another reason that Gallup is sliding down the boards is because in the first round, the Cowboys drafted CeeDee Lamb, and they saw the way in that video he snatched that phone away from his girl, and they were like, man, if this guy can snatch footballs like he snatches phones away from his girls, he's going to be legit.
And look, CeeDee Lamb is actually a guy that I really like a lot. I like this offense as a whole. But when we look at it, well, guess what? Randall Cobb got 18% market share of targets on a per game basis last season. Randall Cobb, I believe, saw almost 90 targets. I want to say it was like 83 targets. So Randall Cobb got a really healthy role. We can project CeeDee Lamb to slide right into that role, see about 90 targets, and that would still be a situation where, again, Michael Gallup, if he plays 16 games, could see 120 plus. I think there's going to be plenty of work to go around. This is an offense that should just roll, and there's going to be opportunities, just like last season, one of the best offensive lines in football. So I think that all of those factors work really well because it causes his price to come down, and you can get Michael Gallup as your wide receiver 3. In many drafts, you could even get him as your wide receiver 4.
So he could be, if he slides that far, you're saying that he could potentially be a really good flex spot.
Oh, 100%. And that's exactly why I'm drafting him.
Right.
Is, I've at least got 2 wide receivers. And honestly, for my drafts, I've taken them oftentimes as my wide receiver 4. So I've got 3 wide receivers. And now I can tack on, Michael Gallup. Cause usually.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, just for perspective, in drafts where, say I'm picking like at the top of the draft, maybe like 2nd overall or something, I usually have like Juju Smith-Schuster, Robert Woods, Tyler Lockett, and then having Michael Gallup as like a wide receiver 4.
What about Tyreek Hill? I mean, is he not? I'm just saying, all these receivers going before him. I mean, is he not?
Yeah, no, I mean, Tyreek Hill I like a lot. In terms of what I'm seeing in drafts, though, I think he's priced appropriately. I'm seeing Tyreek Hill in some cases come off the board ahead of Julio. He's coming off the board. Yep, he's coming off the board right around that, basically, Devontae Adams, Julio, and then, Tyreek Hill is sort of that next area before you get to Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, those guys. And I think that's appropriate. Now in a PPR league, I would have Julio and Devontae ranked ahead of them. Just obviously those are guys that see way more volume. But if I'm talking half point per reception or standard scoring, love Tyreek. I mean, his market share of touchdowns in that offense is consistently around 30%, when he plays games. Even if you're modest, and you project maybe about 35 touchdowns, for Patrick Mahomes, that's still an easy path for 10 TDs for Tyreek Hill. If he plays, at least 14 games, he's going over 1,000 yards. So yeah, I don't think, again, if you could get Tyreek Hill in the top of the 3rd round or something, then yeah, I would definitely have included him. But I think where he's going is appropriate,
So, you're just not as high on him because if you remember correctly, when we were in Arrowhead Stadium and it was 4th and 16 and Mahomes threw that 30-yard beautiful pass to that beautiful number 10 in that red jersey. I would say that's probably, diminishing your love for Tyreek Hill.
I mean, it's some pain. I would like to think it's objective. But no, honestly, I call him Ty Freak. You know me all the time. I call him Ty. I love this guy and I love that profile of player. Love the way he gets used. I mean, again, one of the highest paths in terms of touchdown equity you can get at the position.
Yeah, it's 40-plus yard touchdowns, 50-plus yard. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's literally awesome. The 4th wide receiver I had was Robert Woods. So the situation for LA is really interesting. If you look at the history since Sean McVay arrived, you've got a lot of 11 personnel, right? 3 wide receivers, 1 tight end on the field. If you look at last season, the last half, the last 6 games, they switched to a lot more 12 personnel. This is when Tyler Higbee went off. This is when Cooper Kupp fell off. The one person who's a constant there is Robert Woods. This is a team without Brandon Cooks in the mix There's no way we can project his target share to decrease. There's no competition for it. And this is someone who's perennially underrated. If you talk about, for your wide receiver 2, I want a guy who can deliver wide receiver 2 numbers 50+% of the time, wide receiver 3 60+% of the time, with hopefully a sub 20% bust rate. And what I mean by bust rate is those are games where he's dudding for you, right? Getting you less than 7 points, less than 8 points. So I want someone that has a pretty solid floor. And when you look at Robert Woods relative to his draft spot, this is another guy that you can get in the 5th round, potentially bottom of the 4th round. And often the way I'm drafting, he's ended up as my wide receiver 3. But if you went maybe RB heavy at the top of the draft, I think Robert Woods is really solid as a wide receiver 2 if you find yourself taking your wide receiver 2 in the 5th round. Then the last guy is Brandon Cooks. So the Houston situation is interesting because obviously DeAndre Hopkins is gone. You're talking about 30% of targets that's going to be spread around. And Will Fuller is, I think, someone that we probably want to gravitate towards. His draft spot is right around like 6th, 7th round, which I think is fair. It's kind of expensive, but it's fair.
I would say it's expensive.
Yeah, I think it is expensive, so I don't end up with a lot of Will Fuller. Brandon Cooks is a really great opportunity to get a guy who could be the number 1 wide receiver. Now, to be clear, I don't think anybody in that offense is going to get 30% of the targets. But could Brandon Cooks see 23, 24%? If he does, you're talking about well over 100 targets, could easily see over 70 catches. And he's being drafted oftentimes available in the 8th, 9th round. I mean, you can potentially take Brandon Cooks as your wide receiver 6, your wide receiver 5 for a guy who could potentially be starting for you by the end of the year. So I think that relative to his ADP, Brandon Cooks is practically free right now.
Okay. That's good.
Yeah, I like those.
Got nothing to say.
Receivers.
Continue.
Well, yeah, so that wraps it up for the wide receivers I had. So I guess if you just wanted me to dive into tight ends.
Yeah.
So my number 1 favorite, Malcolm, I already talked to you about him, is Hayden Hurst. This is right in line with my Austin Hooper love from a year ago. I remember in like late July, Austin Hooper was the guy I was just talking about. It was like, oh my God, Austin Hooper is free right now. He was going in like the 10th, 9th round. By around real draft time, like now toward the end of August, Austin Hooper was going in the 5th, 6th round, and I was like, okay, I'm not going to get him. And Mark Andrews became my guy that I was like, all right, I want him. Right now, Hayden Hurst is still in a draftable range. He's still going in like the 8th, 9th round, where I think if you've already got a couple of running backs, you've got your starting wide receivers, and you're getting a tight end, complete potential steal. Austin Hooper was a guy who was seeing about 18% target share. You extrapolate his work over the course of 16 games, you're talking over 100 targets for a tight end. This is like elite top 5 type stuff. And even if we say, okay, Hayden Hurst isn't going to get that much work, let's knock him down a little bit. Well, you could easily have a guy who sees 80 targets to 85, 4 to 5 touchdowns, 500 plus yards. That's enough for a top 10 tight end who, again, you're taking potentially in the 8th and 9th round. So that's where I wanted to start it. I did include Travis Kelce and George Kittle here just because there's kind of a tier at the top, right? There's, Travis Kelce, George Kittle, then you kind of get into Zach Ertz, kind of get into Mark Andrews. And in that tier, I do think drafters should be open to taking Kelce, to taking Kittle, depending on what's going on in their draft.
Yeah, but here's the thing, though, and again, this is just more of a football thing. It just scares me when these guys get paid all this money. It just seems like they get hurt. It's just weird. I feel like that these guys get these huge contracts and then they get hurt. And so I'm looking at George Kittle, and I have this gut feeling, just like McCaffrey, he gets paid all this money, and then he's going to go down with the ACL tear week 3, or something like it. I just have this. It scares me.
I mean, look, that's definitely possible. Kind of the way I go about the projections is I just project out a 16-game season, and on a sort of like granular level, on a draft day, making my rankings level, that's where I can start to think about, okay, what do I think is most likely to happen, things like that. So relative to, the price of maybe getting a running back or a wide receiver, or hell, even getting Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson, I'm not someone who takes a tight end ever in, the first 4 rounds. It's just not the way that I draft. But again, if you have a person that's going like a 0 running back strategy and they're saying, you know what, I'm banking on riding on some of these rookie running backs or, David Montgomery, some of these guys I can get later in the draft, but I want to have the best receivers. I want to have the best tight end. Basically what I'm saying is I think 3rd, 4th round, if you're one of those people that you want to get those guys, I think that's an appropriate place. But Mark Andrews is the 4th guy I put here. And the reason why is Mark Andrews you can typically get and sometimes in the 6th round. I think that's really, really nice because this is someone who has top 3 potential at the position. Now, if you look at Mark Andrews a year ago, obviously he had a vast majority of the work. I think it was just over 25% target share, just over 30% market share touchdowns, plenty of work, doesn't really project to change. The difference is you have Hayden Hurst, who's out of the mix, who saw about a 35% snap rate. For perspective, Mark Andrews only saw about 45% snap rate. So this is a player who's already been prepped, essentially told by the Ravens coaching staff over the course of this offseason to prepare himself for a larger workload. This is someone who's been a diabetic since he was a child, very meticulous about his health, said that he's, again, everybody's in the best shape, but he says that he's has the most lean muscle he's had in his life, lowest body fat he's had in his life. And if we project, okay, this guy sees 55% of the snaps, easily this is someone who can clear 120 targets, who's still going to be a top red zone look. And if we're comparing him to Zach Ertz, or maybe, not Dallas Goedert, but, what's the guy's name? I'm forgetting him in Oakland, Darren Waller, right? If we're comparing him to some of those guys, I think Mark Andrews is clearly, someone that I would want ahead of them because of the upside. Again, if you look at Zach Ertz, well, this is a team that was completely decimated in terms of their wide receivers last season. Greg Ward ended up being one of their leading wide receivers to finish the year.
Can I just make a side note real quick?
Yeah.
Darren Waller looks like he used to get fucked up back in the day.
Dude, he went to Georgia Tech.
That dude just looks like he was the black kid who hung out with all the white kids and was just like, I'll take anything and do anything. Like, look at his face. He's just like, yeah, dude, I'll do it. Yeah. What is that acid? I'll do it. I don't care. Like, sorry, man.
You want me to jump off the roof? God.
Oh, man, give me that pill. Combine them all in a drink.
I mean, that is kind of rough. Like, he literally did. I don't know if you know, he literally did.
Yeah, I know. I watch Hard Knocks, but I'm just saying, like, that's why I said that. This guy looks just like that guy. Anyway.
Yeah. And again, his situation as well. Another team that was decimated from a wide receiver perspective last year. So if we're looking at that, this isn't a case for Baltimore where unless, again, they end up bringing Antonio Brown or adding Dez Bryant or something like that. If that doesn't happen, I like Mark Andrews a lot. And then the last guy, this is a borderline sleeper, but I'm going to have a different guy as a sleeper for y'all. Blake Jarwin. I love Blake Jarwin this year.
All right, it's time for Aaron to go. You got to get off this podcast.
That's why
everybody.
That's why I wanted this, because I want everyone to feel like they know. But I mean, it's just going to make for a fun draft. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Aaron.
I think so. Blake Jarwin. I'm basically salivating over the situation this year because this man is completely free. We're talking 12th, 13th, maybe even 14th round, who has top 10 upside at the position. So here's why I'm here on Blake Jarwin. Look at the Dallas Cowboys offense a year ago. Did you know that their tight ends, meaning Jake Witten and Blake Jarwin, combined for more than 120 targets? Well, Jason Witten is gone. If we project that this guy maybe just gets a slight smaller portion of the Jason Witten role, you're talking about a guy with 80 targets and one of the best offenses in football, with one of the best schedules in the league. If this is a player who finishes the year with 60 catches, 500, 600 yards, and 5 touchdowns, guess what? You just got a top 10 fantasy tight end, and you got him for free. So if you're in a draft where Hayden Hurst comes off the board, maybe the 6th round, someone takes him really aggressively, I'm perfectly fine waiting until maybe the 12th round, taking a Blake Jarwin. And guess what? If it doesn't work out, you're getting guys off of the waiver. But if it does work out, you got a top 10 guy in literally the bottom of the draft. I'm not as in love with him or as surefire of a thing as Mark Andrews to me was last season, but he's really close. Like if I had to put on a grade of how surefire, I was at 100% on Mark Andrews last year. I'm at maybe 92% on Blake Jarwin this year.
Okay. So we've gone through who you like relative to their ADP, the average draft position. I agree with some of the things you said, but also disagree, especially when it comes to the Chiefs. But appreciate that information. So now what I really like to do for the last, I would say, 10 minutes, let's do some really deep sleepers, okay? And then let's do, I would say, 3 to 5 deep sleepers if you have them. And then let's do 3 to 5 guys who you just bust. Like, for instance, to give you a quick example, I last year said the Browns were going to suck big black dick, and they did, and you did as well. So that would be a bust. So give us some, 3 to 5 of each of those spectrums.
Okay, so 3 kind of deep sleepers. The first one would be Deontay Johnson, wide receiver.
No idea who the fuck that is.
Wide receiver for the Pittsburgh Steelers last season.
Oh, God, really?
Absolutely. Again, if we're looking at 2018, 2017, 2016 as comps for what we can expect for this offense, and I tend a little bit more like 2017, 2018, this is an offense that can support 2 elite fantasy wideouts. We're talking about 160 targets for Antonio Brown, 150 targets for Juju Smith-Schuster. Well, if we look at last season, Deontay Johnson had a pretty healthy amount of targets in this offense. He projects as the number 2 wide receiver right now in camp. The wide receiver 3 is expected to be a battle between James Washington and their draft pick Chase Claypool. If this guy finishes as a top 15 fantasy wideout, well, you're getting him in the 9th, 10th round. Again, that's free. You're talking about a wide receiver 6, wide receiver 7 maybe, wide receiver 5. So yeah, Deontay Johnson is one. Another, I'm not even sure. Okay, I will say this one as a sleeper just to keep on the Pittsburgh theme is Eric Ebron. I don't really think I haven't heard anybody talk about Eric Ebron. I haven't read anything about Eric Ebron.
He's on the Steelers now?
He's on the Steelers. He's about to be basically in the Vance McDonald role from 2018, 2017. And guess what, friends? Vance McDonald was a top 10 fantasy tight end in 2018. That should blow your mind because it blew my mind when I found that out. I mean, Vance McDonald. So I at least think Eric Ebron is more talented than Vance McDonald. If this is a guy who just walks into that role, again, you're getting a top 10 fantasy tight end absolutely for free. Another one, I'm not sure how deep of a sleeper this is, but Zach Moss in Buffalo. Out of the rookie running backs, I feel like his ADP is the lowest. Usually guys like Jonathan Taylor, DeAndre Swift are coming off the board ahead of him. But this is someone who might actually project for a really healthy role. Devin Singletary did finally escape under the shadow of Frank Gore last season in sort of like the second half of the year.
Those were sneaky good last year, man.
Oh, absolutely. And you're talking about one of the best offensive line in football that has complete continuity. This is a team that's coming back with their returning quarterback, returning head coach, returning offensive coordinator, with all 5 offensive linemen coming back. That's very rare. There's only about 4 teams in the league who can say that this season. In a COVID-19 year, I think that might be significant. This is a team that's going to run the football. We already know that. They're going to be good at it. They're going to do it around the goal line. Now, Zach Moss, you don't completely love just because obviously Josh Allen is going to get a lot of those rush attempts around the goal line and inside the 10. but he may actually get more of those opportunities than Devin Singletary. So again, relative to where you can get him, pretty late, 10th, 11th round, he's a guy that's worth a flyer, I think, unless you get someone who's just like a Zach Moss-Truther and takes him really high. And the last one I'll just sneak in real quick is Jordan Howard. Now this might make you throw up in your mouth a little bit, but
I have the taste for sure.
Right? But if you actually look at it, Jordan Howard, in terms of rushing touchdown upside, is one of the most consistent guys in the NFL when on the field. This is an offense in Miami that, look, they're still going to be really bad. They're still going to have a really bad offensive line. But last year, if you look at a lot of metrics, their offensive line was like one of the worst, right? When I'm not just talking about last year, I'm talking about one of the worst in recent memory. This is an offense that's at least...
Poor Biko right
You
now.
just get shitted on, man, on every podcast.
I forgot about
I mean,
it.
we're not talking about one of the worst offensive lines just last year. We're talking about the history of when a football was thrown.
It really was one of the worst we had seen in recent years. But the good news for Biko is they're at least going to be a professional offensive line. They still project, to be, again, the worst in the league, but they're at least going to be professional level. I think that makes a difference. Ryan Fitzpatrick led this team in rushing yards last year. I'll say that again.
Grandpa.
Say that
You guys stop shitting on the Dolphins, man. I mean,
Ryan
what the?
Fitzpatrick led this team in rushing yards last season. So what that tells me is this is an offense that's desperate to have someone
That
who can
means that
just...
I could strap on a Dolphins helmet and get more.
I mean, look at Patrick Laird, right? I mean, that's what Patrick Laird did. So Jordan Howard could easily walk into a role where he's seeing 60% of the rushing work. And sure, this isn't an offense that I expect to be some elite running team, but if you get 60% of that work, this is a guy who could easily get you 900 yards if he gets that work for the full 16 games and potentially get 6 or 7 touchdowns. Where he's going in his draft position right now, he's a sneaky RB2 that you could get, again, 10th, 11th, 9th round.
Nice. I like those. I really like those picks. And we're sorry, Biko. You just happen to be a fan of a really shitty team.
Dude, it's alright to defend Biko. LSU won, and he's probably going to have a good draft this year because things are looking up for him in fantasy. So
Sure. Well, go ahead. Finish up your bust real quick. Do 3 to 5 of those, and we'll wrap up.
Okay. So my bust number 1 is DeAndre Hopkins. Where I have DeAndre Hopkins projected is a lot closer to guys like Marvin Jones and Stephon Diggs than it is to guys like Julio. So the deal with DeAndre Hopkins is he's coming off of a career where he's consistently been getting 30+% of targets. That is completely rare. To put that in perspective, Julio Jones only saw 24% of targets last season, and he had more than 150 targets. So when we look at this Arizona Cardinals offense, my problem with the projections on DeAndre Hopkins across the industry is I'm wondering where these targets, where these yards are coming from. You're talking about an offense that had Kyler Murray had less than 4,000 passing yards last year. I think I have him projected for about 3,800 this year. And from what I recall, that'd be like a 300-yard increase. So
real quick, if I can just real quick to kind of go your point real quick on that is Kingsbury, right? Cliff Kingsbury, is that his name?
Yep.
Yeah. So he strikes me as the type of guy, right, where if you go to his house in his garage, he's got all of the best tools, but he doesn't use them all the time. As opposed to you going to someone else's garage, right, and guy's got one really good tool that he uses all the time. So I think that Cliff Kingsbury likes having this shiny tool like Hopkins, but I don't think that he's going to use him that much.
And that's, I think, a really sharp take because when you look at the way this offense ran last season, Larry Fitzgerald led them in receiving yards. I don't think a lot of people are aware of that. Larry Fitzgerald saw a 20% market share of targets. Christian Kirk was at about 22%. So it's very difficult for me to project DeAndre Hopkins for even a 25% market share of targets in this offense, which, by the way, speaking of 12 personnel, when they switched to more 12, they started winning more football games. Now, Cliff Kingsbury still wants to play fast and, get 70 plays per game. So I think he wants to spread it out. But like you said, Malcolm, I don't think that DeAndre Hopkins is going to get anywhere close to the kind of volume we've been seeing, yet he's being taken in the first round of drafts. I think it is absolutely insane to take this guy anywhere close to Julio.
It's shiny. Right, it's that shiny tool people want.
Yeah. Another bust. I'm going to go with the tight end on this one, Austin Hooper, just because I'm still seeing this guy get drafted, and I don't really think he should be. So, like, when I talk about...
Where's he at now?
Cleveland.
He's in Cleveland.
Oh, my God. Yep.
He's in Cleveland. So, here's the thing. I like this Browns offense this year. I mean, you know this, Malcolm. You know, I'm bullish on Odell Beckham. I'm bullish on Baker. Not that I think you need to draft Baker Mayfield. I think he's going to be kind of like a Kirk Cousins from what we've seen the past couple of years. But guess what? Kirk Cousins could support top fantasy wideouts with elite fantasy running game. When we look at the way that tight ends are likely to be used in Kevin Stefanski's offense, I think Austin Hooper will be involved. I think that he's going to get some red zone opportunities. But guess what? David Njoku is going to get some opportunities as well. This is a team that's going to continue to throw to Odell, is going to continue to throw to Jarvis, and they're not going to be anywhere close to the pass volume that the Atlanta Falcons were at last year. Atlanta Falcons, you're talking about 600 plus pass attempts. Well, Baker might not even throw it 550, 530 times under Kevin Stefanski's offense. So people taking Austin Hooper ahead of Hayden Hurst is blowing my mind. You know, I've seen Austin Hooper come off the board ahead of Tyler Higbee. People aren't drafting Eric Ebron. They're not drafting Blake Jarwin, people who could actually see 90 targets, but they're drafting Austin Hooper. I think it's a real fish move. So huge bust. And then the last one I'm going to go with is at running back, Todd Gurley. Now,
don't say it.
Now, again, just to be completely clear, I'm not one of these guys that's down on Todd Gurley. I'm not going to say I think he's washed. I do think it's worth mentioning. One of the reports I read on The Athletic, basically the running backs coach is quoted as saying that Todd Gurley doesn't have the same push that he used to. It was reported that at his first day of camp, he was walking around with a noticeable limp. And that led to them reducing his workload over the course of this training camp. So yes, that's very scary, but this is a guy who clearly intends to just play through this. And Atlanta, I think, is at least going to use him in a Devontae Freeman capacity, which, look, that's fantasy relevant. The reason why I have Todd Gurley here is because this is a guy I'm seeing drafted in the second round, and I think that's completely egregious. You know, taking Todd Gurley in the range of Chris Carson, I think is crazy. I think there's a clear separation there. And when we look at Todd Gurley, we need to be thinking, okay, high-end Devontae Freeman, not be thinking Todd Gurley 2 years ago, or even Todd Gurley last season, who got a lot of work at the goal line. Atlanta Falcons offense, they pass inside the 10 at a higher rate than almost any other team in the league. This is not the Todd Gurley that we saw before, but he's being drafted like it. I think, you know, Todd Gurley, if you can get him in the 5th round, right, in the David Montgomery range, well, hey, that's absolutely valuable. Take him as an RB2 when you've already got 3 wideouts, something like that. But the draft price you're going to have to pay, most likely, to get him in your drafts is way, way, way too high. So that's why I included him as a bust.
Yeah, and Gurley, and I'm sorry, Kyle, I'm just being honest. Gurley is unfortunately one of those dudes in the NFL, and we've seen this happen with plenty of their running backs. The guy goes off for 2 years, and he fucks up his knee, right? And he's never the same. And I just think that Gurley is not – I just think that from a football sense, he got paid, right? So he's got his money, man.
He got the bag.
He got the bag, so –
yeah.
I mean, if he's like, look, you know, I don't want to destroy my knee anymore, he just doesn't strike me as a guy now, not before, now, who has like that obsession with football. Like, he doesn't strike me as that type of guy. He got paid, and, you know, I just think that me personally, I wouldn't even draft him. I don't care where he's sitting. I think he's going to get hurt again. I really do. I think that it's like my boy, Charles?
Jamal Charles.
Jamal Charles. I mean, that's another example, right? The guy goes off number 1, number 2 fantasy running back, I think. And then he's always fucking hurt.
And it was funny because Jamal Charles, remember the stat I mentioned about running backs who finished number 1? So he was one of those guys who he had finished number 1, and then the next season he finished like 157th overall. Then the next season he finished number 1 again. Then the following season he fell off again. So I mean that might, and I think it's unfortunate because I loved Jamal Charles. I thought it was really sad.
He's such a great dude. Like, quick story for everyone. I've told you this, Aaron. Jamal Charles. So in Kansas City during Thanksgiving, okay, what they do is they have the Chiefs players go to lower income houses and give free turkeys away. This is on live TV. Jamal Charles and with the local camera station, TV station, Jamal Charles has his turkey, knocks on the door, opens it up, and they're like, hey, blah, blah. This old black grandma says, well, why don't you start winning some fucking games, and slam the door.
Oh my gosh.
I always think of that story, and they're just kind of like, cut. Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying. I think that Todd Gurley, Jamal Charles, very similar paths. For me personally, I won't draft him. I don't care if he's there 12th round. I think he gets hurt. And then what do you think about Phillip Rivers? I mean, I know I hate him. I'm asking him genuinely.
Yeah, like from a fantasy perspective, right?
Yes.
I think he has a lot of kids.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, Aaron, my new team name is Phillip Rivers Abortion Clinic.
Oh, wow. That's crazy. Yeah, man. I mean, Phillip Rivers, it's an interesting case because when you look at, Jacoby Brissett last season, the production wasn't awful. I mean, it was really solid, and I think it's exactly what this Frank Reich coaching staff wants. It's a really small sample, right? His first season, he's got access to Andrew Luck. Then his next year, he's at Jacoby Brissett. So it's a really kind of tough offense to project. I think where I'm leaning towards, though, is projecting maybe just like a slight uptick in passing volume from a year ago. But there's no doubt about it. This team wants to run. The reports on Jonathan Taylor sound really, really good. I think we could see a situation where Marlon Mack is consistently starting games, but Frank Reich and some of the coaches have already said they're going to go with hot hands, over the course of the game. So when you look at their schedule, it's pretty favorable. This is a defense that's probably going to be solid. This is an offensive line that's one of the best in football. And it still isn't a situation where I can go and project like very clearly, okay, T.Y. Hilton, I've got a ton of confidence he's still going to play 16 games. Paris Campbell, I've got a ton of confidence he's going to be a reliable option. The reports on Michael Pittman, the rookie wide receiver they drafted, are pretty good. But again, rookie COVID-19 year, new quarterback, new system for Phillip Rivers. Jacoby Brissett is basically having to help teach him the offense. So I'm just pumping the brakes. This is a guy who had a lot of volume last year and was inefficient. So with projecting less volume for him, I've got him, projected under 20 touchdowns, under 4,000 yards. So that's kind of where I have him finishing. Not someone that I would draft. Yeah, right. Definitely draft. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to wrap this up. But no, hey, Aaron, appreciate you coming on again.
Hey, thanks for having me.
To give us some inside juice for our draft next Saturday. Just to give everyone a sneak peek. After we draft, we're going to have Aaron back on. And it's going to be a little bit longer, but we're going to briefly go through each of our draft teams, and he's going to grade us from an A to an F on how we did. So,
yeah, and that's what I was about to say. It's awesome always having Aaron on with us, and can't wait to get him back after the draft and roast him on some of our teams.
Oh my gosh! Anyway,
I'm looking forward to it. I hope I'm just going to be salivating over the teams because they're going to look so good.
I got it.